Hey guys, welcome back to the First Methodist Shreveport podcast. I'm here with the one and only Cassie Hammett, a
Hey,
local
how
hero.
are you?
Doing good. You're definitely a local hero here in Shreveport as the founder of the Hub Urban Ministries and a lot of other things that we're going to get into.
Yeah.
So how are you, Cassie?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing good.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. You're definitely one of those people who, like, if we talk about local missions in Shreveport, you have to be involved because the stuff that you've done and how God's moved through you in all of your ministries is just, I'm really excited to hear how it started and, you know, where it's all going now.
Yeah, totally.
So can you tell us, like, the origin story of Cassie Hammett?
Oh, of me?
Yeah.
In 1984. No, I'm just kidding. So as far as the Hub goes, you know, I think one of the things that is interesting about the story of the Hub is that I started it accidentally. And what I mean by that is that I didn't actually set out to start anything. I didn't really have that plan in place. I was very young, straight out of college, graduated from Louisiana Tech, got married, knew that, you know, because of just in my faith and my walk with the Lord, knew, you know, in a lot of ways what I was supposed to do with my life, but didn't really know like what that would look like in practice. Cause you know, there's not a lot of people around that are like, yeah, I want to work with the homeless and here's the pathway to do that. And so I, very long story short, took a job at the Shreveport Rescue Mission. That's what landed me here in Shreveport when they opened their new shelter downtown. And then from there, God just began to sort of stir in me just a passion for the poor in our city, but also for the local church. And so what I mean by I started accidentally is that honestly, like the very beginning of the Hub was just me trying to walk out what I felt like the Lord was asking of me personally. Yeah. Not, hey, I want to get this thing going. I want to start this big movement. I didn't have any thoughts like that. I have no background in how to, I didn't come out of college with a business plan or anything like that. And so I just started spending time with people in the downtown area.
And were you drawn, like, is that kind of, or what, was that like your seeing, like, were you drawn to, like, saw a need in the homeless ministry whenever you were younger? Or, like, how did, I guess, God bring that into your heart?
So in high school, I went on a mission trip with my church that summer, the summer of my sophomore year. And I mean, I was just like every dumb teenager that goes on a mission trip, you know, just barely paying attention and don't really want to be there. Really only there for the food we're going to get to eat. And we're going to get to go to the mall and see cool stuff. And one afternoon, we were there working with a rescue mission in San Francisco. And so it was putting us in some really uncomfortable environments if you had never been in that before. So, I mean, the trip itself was really high on exposure as far as, you know, it wasn't an easy trip. Yeah. We didn't go there and clean out closets or sort donations. We were like kind of thrust into this community of people who were living outdoors.
And was that like the first time that you had experienced something like that, or
in that amount of saturation? Yes. Okay. Like just, you know, you're talking 4 or 5 days of that, and it was from, you know, morning till evening, and we were like in their community and serving and feeding people and things like that. That was definitely the first time I had done those types of things. My parents not obviously, because this is not always true, but my parents had raised me to understand poverty. I wasn't necessarily sheltered from that. Yeah. I would say I wasn't necessarily drawn to it though when I was in high school. I mean, you know, but one afternoon I had just an interaction with someone who, an unhoused friend that we met in a park, and it immediately sort of took a turn from just a kind of casual conversation like we had been having all week with people to me realizing like, oh, this dude has something to say to me. Like it felt really prophetic and ended up being that is the case. But I was 16. I didn't know what to do with that. You know, I was new. I would say I was new in pursuing Jesus. Yeah. And didn't really have like a understanding of how God speaks through other people and prophetic words and things like that. Mm-hmm. I knew, though, even without the context, my soul knew. You know, when you're talking with someone or when the Lord is saying something to you, you know it, whether you can put language to it or not. I mean, I was 16. I was an idiot. But it arrested I felt very, like, stopped in my tracks when he started speaking to me. And basically, like, just gave a prophetic sort of picture of my life.
Wow.
And I would think I was crazy, but there were multiple people around who heard it too. So, like, you know, it was one of those. Yeah, we can verify it. And so I had that moment, and, you know, I had to reckon with that as a teenager. And, you know, you go home from a mission trip and everything goes back to normal. Mm-hmm. But it didn't go back to normal for me. You know, it knocked something sideways in my life. Yeah. And told my parent, you know, shared with my parents, who have always been cheerleaders of not, you need to do what everyone's doing, but cheerleaders of, like, you need to do what God is saying, which I'm super thankful for. So told them sort of what happened, processed it with them. And then from there, in the summers, my parents kind of encouraged me, hey, well, why don't you in the summers just spend some time serving at different places, you know, to see, like, just to kind of try to learn. And because there wasn't a lot of clarity exactly what God was saying necessarily and practical. And so I spent the rest of my high school summers serving actually in the city here in Shreveport. And then when I graduated college, I went back to San Francisco for the summer to live there because I was so intrigued I was an adult, you know, I was 18. I was really intrigued by what God had said to me, you know, 2 years prior to that.
Mm-hmm. And is the unhoused situation different, or was it different in California then compared to Shreveport? Or, like, I guess
I would say in a lot of ways similar, but in a lot of ways very different as far as how many individuals, you know, in San Francisco, there's, you know, I don't even know the number of people who are living unhoused. I also lived in an area of San Francisco that is, like, in the top 10 list of, like, drug activity and things like that. So it wasn't just unhoused population. It was also you know, those who are struggling with mental health, drug addiction. So I was, you know, immersed for that summer, and I went back again for another summer. And I went back, honestly, because I was like, this is the place that I heard God speak the clearest to me. And I literally went to the bench. Like, when I landed, got all my stuff, I got on the subway, went straight to it, because I was like, I want to figure this out. And so I feel like in a lot of ways that part of my story, you know, people beg their whole life to know exactly what they're supposed to do.
Yes.
And I wouldn't say I knew exactly what I was supposed to do, but I am thankful for that treasure of God sort of stopping me early in my life and beginning that conversation with me, so that, I mean, you know, fast forward till now, you know, 18 years in, that's crazy.
Right.
So that's kind of the origin story. And what's cool about the conversation I had with that man when I was 16 is that not just that it was, like, prophetic and it has happened, but there were things that he said specifically that, as I've walked through even the hub up until recently, others have said to me at crucial times the exact same words.
Wow.
And so it has been like this consistent thread that, you know, started when I was 16 and is still something that God is keeping me tethered to as hey, keep going. Yeah. Like, you're still moving in the right direction. It's hard to explain because I'm not going to get into all the things he said, but he said some really weird stuff that, like, at the time didn't make sense. But over time, and I think this is what's important to know about how God speaks, is that it may not make sense in the moment. Yeah. And we want it to. Like, we want to say, oh, this means that. And it makes us feel better when we can, like, you know, draw a straight line between something that we feel like God is saying, or someone says to us that God has said. We want to be able to be like, oh, this is what that means, and we feel good about that.
Yeah.
That wasn't how this was. It was I had to wait a long time for a lot of it to make sense. Mm-hmm. But it has been just God's kindness and something that's really hard because the line of work I am in is difficult.
Yeah.
That at some of the most crucial, difficult times, those same words have come up out of other people's mouths to just sort of make this tapestry of a story that, for me personally, that no one else knows about.
Yeah.
Just between me and the Lord, So that has been, it's just the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. Do you find yourself like guarding that story? Like, because you almost want to protect, like, so that like, can verify when they say this is from the Lord.
Yeah, totally. I do guard it. And also, like, because it is so personal, it doesn't always translate. You know, you can't really translate something that special and sacred. It's hard to put words to that. It's hard to help people understand. Thankfully I did have witnesses, because sometimes it sounds a little like larger than life.
Yeah.
And there have been times in my life where I've reached out to those people and been like, help me out here. You heard that, right? Because it has been just so God to move the way that he has in my life. And so I think what's cool about the story of the Hub's like origin story is, besides me just trying to be obedient, it had nothing to do with me. Like, I didn't have a big fancy plan. I didn't really want to start anything. Like, that wasn't the agenda.
Yeah.
And I love that, because I think what it always reminds me is that God had a story for our city, has a story for our city. And all of us that live here are a part of that narrative.
Yeah.
And his plan was to use the Hub. It wasn't my plan. Like, I didn't, come up with this. And so I love that part of our story, because I think it keeps a sense of humility present that says, this is not mine. Like, I'm stewarding something that God was going to do with or without me. Like, thankfully he invited me into this, and it's the greatest treasure of my life, but he didn't have to. And clearly he was going to do it because, like, I didn't set out to do this. And so basically, as I was trying to sort of wrestle down, like, what does a life look like in tandem with the poor? Like, that was really when we moved here. Like, how do I start something? I was like, how do I structure a life that resonates with this conviction I have about the poor and the vulnerable? And we all have felt this before, but how do we merge having things and middle class life and all this stuff? How do we merge all of that? That was really where this all started. Yeah. And so as I spent time with people in poverty, people who were unhoused, and really just became friends. I mean, that ultimately, what I know now looking back, is that was God's original desire for me, was friendship with those in the margins. And that's what happened. I mean, I developed really deep friendships with those who I was encountering. I say we, it was just me.
Was it ever difficult? Like, did you ever, I don't know, because I get what you're saying.
The answer is yes. It has been difficult from the beginning. Yeah, definitely.
I don't know, I really resonate with what you said about living your personal life, but also acknowledging the needs of the poor. Because I feel like whenever you're in that situation, you go to help the unhoused people, it's like you are confronted with your life and their life, and there is a drastic difference. And you leave that situation with almost a sense of guilt.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's hard to justify, like, how do I, like, know that these people need what they need, but also make the decision to go buy Lululemon pants for myself.
That's right.
And so, like, and then obviously, like, being friends with those people, like, you're confronted with that much more often than most people. So how did you work through that?
Yeah, so it's present tense. It's something I'm still working through. I don't know that, hopefully that will never be something that just I forget about, right? Because I think there are two extremes. I think people feel that friction and they either say, this is too uncomfortable, so I'm just not going to help in any way because it makes me really uncomfortable. Or you see the other extreme, which is like, oh no, I have to sell everything and like live in my car, to be able to. And don't get me wrong, like if that's what God's telling you to do, just do it. Like, but I do think you see these two extremes happen in people because it is a very difficult thing to be confronted with consistently. And so I think people just want out of that discomfort. I have not found a way out of that discomfort because it is the running reality of my life is that I have a home and I have a car and, kids. Kids and a bank account and a savings account, all these things. And so I would say for me in particular, it has changed and does change how a lot of decisions that I make, how I shop, what I spend, it does inform. So I would say there's no shame, there's no guilt, but that constant tension does actually inform me in some ways. And I have made decisions over time to try my best to live in that tension in a way that honors the poor. And what I mean by that is, for me in particular, like choosing not to, this is like in the weeds, so we don't have to get into this, but this is just an example. I have chosen over the last few years to even change the way I shop for clothing, to buy used only, to buy ethically, things like that. It informs me, right? It says you can't ignore these realities. You can take all the things that God's given you and still have those things and not have shame about those things because those things can be used. Like that's kingdom stuff right there. Like whatever he's given you, he can use. But because I think what people will say is, okay, yeah, like God can use everything I have, and they continue to just hoard and hoard and hoard and whatever. So I think the middle ground is, yes, I acknowledge that God has given these things to me to steward. And so I need to steward them with wisdom. And for me, what that means is I need a life that doesn't just, that doesn't create this massive chasm in my decisions. Do I have to do that? No. Could I buy Lulu? Sure. Yeah. Like this is not right or wrong, right? Like this isn't like, it's not about that. But for me, I need to find the middle ground between the two extremes because I'm in it every day. Yeah. And, one thing that walking with vulnerable people has done for me is keep all of those things in check. Teach me how to have limits to spending and consuming, and teach me to think about consumption and think about the difference between want and need, and think about, putting myself on a budget even though I don't have to, meaning a small budget, like trimming down what I'm, all of those decisions are my constant way of trying to hold that middle ground between the extremes of I'm ashamed to have what I have, or I'm going to hide in what I have. So trying to find, and so long answer to say, I still don't know the exact answer to how to do that.
Yeah. I feel like those are great options though.
It's just a constant question of the Lord I'm asking is, what about the way I'm living right now could change or be trimmed down to better honor what I know to be true about what's happening in the world. And then just being willing to make those decisions and stick to them, and eventually you realize like, oh, okay, well, the point is that we don't need all this stuff.
True.
You know what I mean? There's no shame in it.
Yes.
But the point is that most of us are living in massive excess. And so putting limits, I know for me personally, has helped me hold the tension, is limiting myself when I don't have to, like paring my life down, and making sure that I'm not living outside of those limits constantly. But that is a constant wrestle of mine. It's not something that ever stops bothering me. If I'm being honest, like it is a constant, just like, of I leave work and have to reckon with what I just saw or experienced. There have been times where that's been harder There are times when it's been easier. It's just a constant tension in my personal life that I have to keep an eye on.
Yeah. So what's the strangest thing you bought secondhand?
Oh, the strangest thing I've bought. Oh, that I have a lot of strange things.
Or I guess like daily essentials. Like what's the strange, whenever you say I buy this secondhand, like for me it's shoes. Like whenever I tell people I buy shoes secondhand, they're like, no.
Yeah.
Never.
I own a floor length pink fur. So let me say this. Limits, yes, I bought it secondhand, but I still have some like really ridiculous things. So I don't want people to think that I have like 4. Now my husband, 5 t-shirts in his closet, all black, fine. But I would say that's probably the weirdest thing I've bought secondhand, and it's just hanging there. I mean, we live in Shreveport. When am I going to use that? But I think for me, I try to find. This is just my personality, but I just try to find the joy in even the limits, you know. It's not a martyr thing. Yeah. Because even with limits, I'm still living above the line. You know what I'm saying? Like, and just realizing that and just realizing like I can walk through a store and not purchase anything. That is a thing I can choose to do. Yes. And I'm making that choice for a reason. Yeah. Could I buy that? Sure. But I don't have to buy that. And understanding sort of need versus want and not shaming want, because like we're supposed to enjoy life. So it's that it is a constant tension. And we talk about it as a team a lot, because this is kind of a perfect example of this. But one year there was a snowstorm or something, and we were processing it as a team the week after, because our team struggled really massively with this snowstorm. I mean, obviously, like, we were trying to get people indoors and all the things that happen when you're in our field when there's a really bad storm or something like that. And so we had been doing all that. Anyways, we were processing it as a staff the next week, and several of our staff members that had children were talking about the conflict they felt about going out in the snow and having fun with their children. This conflict inside, which is like, this is awesome for us. This is not awesome for people we know by name.
Because you have the option to go back inside and get warm.
And so just trying to find the ability to enjoy, like to hold that tension. And what we're constantly talking about is we don't have to choose one or the other. We can enjoy it and also hold the sadness. Like we don't have to go one way. We can hold both of those things. And that's a hard life to live.
I cannot imagine.
Yeah, it's a really hard life to live. But I do believe it's the healthy approach to longevity in compassion work, because so many people flame out so fast. And I do think if you want to stay in it for the long haul, if this is a legacy thing for you, like it is for me, I have to live differently according to that, right? Like I can't flame out. I can't go all one way or the other. I have to find a way to hold all of it and process it and not go to the extremes, or else I wouldn't be here, 18 years in. So.
Yeah. And so starting the hub, where, I guess you said you were following God's vision for what that was going to be. And so what was it like when you started? Like, what were you thinking getting started with the hub in Shreveport? You say you didn't have a business plan, but... And it's funny because when I hear you say I was following God's vision, I know that now, but I don't want people to think that like I was like, I know exactly what's happening here. Because I didn't. Like I was meeting people, getting into friendship with people. And essentially what happened was these were now my friends. They were sharing these stories because I was seeing them every day. I was sort of encountering as life was happening to them, what was going on. And because I was born and raised here, I know a lot of people, as you do in the South in a relatively small town, not small town, but you know. And so I was just telling people, like, I would be like, oh, this is so crazy. My friend, John, we'll use that as an example. Yeah. This is what happened to him. And, I was just talking about it because this was just what I was doing. And what started happening was I would tell you, let's use you as an example. I would tell you this story, just like at a hangout, we'd be hanging out and I'd be like, oh my gosh, yesterday I talked to this guy. And you would be like, oh my gosh, like, what can I do? Yeah. And I would be like, oh,
well, actually, he needs, these 10 things. He lives outdoors. His camp burned down. He needs these 10 things. Well, you're in a small group at a church. And so you're like, oh, my small group can totally, that's easy, right? Yeah. You go back to your small group. And in a day, you know how this works. You guys have it all collected. Everyone's pumped. Yeah. They call me and they're like, hey, you can come get this stuff to take to John. And I say to you, no, we can take it to John because you bought it.
Yeah.
Because what I did know is I wanted people to know what I knew. That's what I did know.
Yeah.
I want you to know John. More than I want this stuff to get to his camp, I want you to know him. And so you would meet me. There was always a shift in the conversation where people went from pumped to like, uh-oh.
We're going to have to get in
this. And so I said, meet me at this intersection and we'll walk under, where he lives. And then you guys would meet me. We would take the stuff. And then your small group comes out completely different. And that's what was, that I can look back and see that. At the time, I didn't know that. But yeah. I think what was happening was in our city at the time, there wasn't a lot of opportunity for engagement at that level. You could volunteer places, but it wasn't that raw. It wasn't that hands-on. You weren't seeing it possibly at all. And I think it wasn't that churches and people in our city didn't want to help. I think it's that they didn't know how to help. And so me and Brent was voluntold at the time. Essentially, we just became guides to how to do it. We weren't doing it, but we were the bridge between you and your world and John and his world, and facilitating sort of these moments of connection. And, obviously we want John's needs met, but we also want you to know John, and we want what I know is going to happen in you. I want that to happen in you, right? Yeah. Not that it's fun because like you said earlier, it does kind of mess with your mind and mess with your heart. But I just wanted people to know them, and I wanted people to know what I knew about God because of them, right? Because there's an element of faith that is, I believe, attached to the vulnerable.
Yeah.
I do believe that. I believe that there are parts of God's nature that we can't really fully understand outside of that, outside of stepping into life with people who are struggling and suffering. And so that's what I mean, that it was accidental. And then it was just kind of this snowball effect where I can remember my phone started ringing a lot more, and I can remember maybe you've gone to work and you've told a coworker, and now the coworker, you gave the coworker my number, which this is why I had to change my number 4 times in the first 10 years of the hub. But now your coworker is like, well, we want to do something.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was fast too. It was happening very quickly. And so we were then able to say, okay, well, if we have this many people that want to do something, then maybe we could do something bigger, to not be so one person at a time, but maybe we could figure out how to serve more people at once. And so I remember one Christmas, the first Christmas, all of this was going on. I took all of those phone numbers of people who had called me, and I was like, hey, I think it'd be cool if we did a real Christmas meal, outside, for people. Not to go plates, for real, like we would have anywhere when we go to the holidays at our family's house.
Yeah.
And so I called all those numbers of people who had been like, we want to help. And then I made a little crappy flyer and drove around and, just gave it out to people I knew. And I remember pulling up that day, and I think there were close to 300 people there to eat. This is the first thing we ever did like this. Wow. And I remember thinking, oh no, I just didn't understand that it just blew my expectations.
So and 300, the people that showed up to eat were the ones who were given flyers?
Yeah, well, I didn't give out that many flyers. Oh, but, word spread. Yeah. And then that day, out of a response. So I would say Simple Church actually was the first church in the city that was like, we're in, because we're both crazy like that. I mean, and so they had a group of people here. And then by the end of that whole thing, almost 100 volunteers came.
Whoa.
And so we ended up having to split the event at 2 locations because there was too many people and we had to go make more food. I mean, it was like this huge, chaotic, crazy day. And I remember getting in the car after and just like staring into, staring straight ahead. And my husband and I were just sitting there really quietly. And I was like, oh, this is something.
Yeah.
It was like it clicked. Like, there's something here that's bigger than what we thought.
Yeah.
Because also what I can like literally feel and smell, and I can go right back to that memory. I remember looking and saying, not only are people being fed, but the culture of it was different, right? We were all sitting down and talking and laughing, and we played bingo, which this is what's crazy. We played bingo at that first thing. We have been playing bingo for 18 years, literally every week. Like it stuck. It was like,
tradition's a powerful thing.
Huh?
It's a tradition's a powerful thing.
It's crazy. I that was an accident. Like I was like, oh, it'd be fun if we played bingo for prizes, and now it's every week. But it wasn't just that people got fed. There was a tangible difference in the how.
Yeah.
It wasn't a long line of people just grabbing food and leaving. It was like, oh, this is different. Like this is something that is special. There's something here that I think is different. And so from there, my dad, he runs a business here in town. Shout out Martin Specialty Coatings. I remember him coming to me and being like, hey, I think you need to get your nonprofit status, because I didn't have it.
Really?
Yeah. And I was like, I don't want that. And he was like, well, you are taking people's money into your own bank account. So like eventually,
really? Goodness.
They trust you. That's awesome. But eventually, like, that's going to be a problem.
I think this is past the 7 years that the IRS can come after you.
I know. Yeah. We're past the point. Yeah. No. So, because the hub, quote unquote, started in 2007, but our nonprofit status was in 2009. Okay. So that's how I think that's what's cool about this story is I was late to the party. Like I literally was like, I am not interested in running a nonprofit, and my dad was like, well, you are though.
Yeah.
Essentially running a nonprofit. Like you're going to have to do that. And so I went through the process and, then had to pick a name. It was like that kind of formalized where we are now, the beginnings of where we are now. And if you look at our original like IRS paperwork, the board is my dad, my husband, and like a friend. Like it was literally the most mom and pop. You could tell that I was like, I don't want to do this. You know what I mean? And so that allowed for us to move it out of our bank account. And I mean, because I think what people don't know is the first few years of the hub, Brent and I it was all our money, what we were doing.
Yeah.
And so Brent was very thankful to to have that change.
Not be supporting.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's my favorite story because I think again, it goes back to God was interested in doing a set of things. And I do believe he would have done it with or without me. I do believe that. And I'm just thankful that even with all of my stubbornness and lack of awareness at times, and I'm just thankful that he allowed for me to keep saying yes to it over and over and over again. And so we became a nonprofit in 2009. And to be honest with you, growth-wise for the hub, it has pretty consistently always been up and to the right as far as growth. Yeah. That doesn't mean it's been up and to the right easy. But there has always been a sense that like this is answering something, right? Like we're not begging people to like we stepped into something that God designed for our city. That's truly how we feel. Yeah. Which is a weighty thing to carry, and to make sure you steward it. But because people are always like, oh, I bet it was so hard to get traction. I was like, no, the problem was that there was too much traction. Like, I didn't know what to do with the amount of, and I think that speaks to our city and to the church here.
Yeah. And
again, they just needed a guide. Like, it wasn't, they were cold-hearted and didn't want to help people. It's that they looked into the city and couldn't figure out how. And so as soon as someone was a guide to that, it was just an overnight, like, put us in, like, whatever you need.
Yeah.
And I think that is just a testament to the local church here. And it's for us, has always been that way.
Yeah.
I have conversations with people from other places that are like, how do you reconcile not being angry with the church and what you do? And I'm like, because in my city, the church is stepping up.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not having that issue.
And especially like Shreveport is a unique place.
It's
like
very
doing
unique.
These podcasts, and we've gotten to talk to 20 something people, the network that Shreveport has to address like the unhoused ministry, the people who are going through abuse, and the people who are in just dire life situations, and how churches in Shreveport come alongside these organizations. Like
it's special.
Yeah.
It's
the
really
fabric,
unique.
the social, I guess the safety net here outside of government.
That's right.
And like community connected is just so powerful.
I mean, at the hub, there's a list of, you guys are one of them, this church is one of them, but there's a list of probably 10 to 15 churches that we could pick up the phone anytime we needed anything.
Yeah.
Cell phone numbers of people, you know, who are like Michelle here. Michelle, shout out Michelle. She's my hero. But people who are just, what do we do? You know, no red tape, no committee meeting, you know, just, like, point us in the direction. What do you need?
Yeah.
And so that also is a part of the hub story, you know, is that we didn't get 18 years down the road by ourselves. You know, we are a living, breathing testament of the body of Christ and what it looks like when it actually works.
Yes.
And when you allow for all of the church to be a part, and when you allow for the whole body to be a part of it. And I think one thing that we laugh about a lot as a team is there's some people on the team who have been around since the story I just told.
Oh, wow.
And so we laugh about how always what has been true about the hub is volunteers never leave feeling like we don't need them. I'm sure they're leaving like, ooh, these people need, you know, and we want that. We want there to be space for people in our community to show up and address things with us, right? Like, we don't want to be a nonprofit that just raises all this funding and can just write a check for everything. Because what happens when you get into that category, or when you're fully funded in some other, whatever way, is that you don't need anybody. And so I don't get to pull you in, right? And what that means is we lose you and your personality and your gifts, your talents. And so for us, when we need something, our first question is always, who has it? Yeah. Not because we're like just hustling, like, you know, people for money or people for their stuff. But if you have it, what I know to be true is if you have what we need and I invite you to give that, one, it addresses that tension we talked about earlier, gives you the opportunity to steward something you have that others don't. Yes. But what I also know is it connects you to what we're doing. And now you know, right, what's going on. And now you are now woven into this, whatever the circumstance might be. Yeah. And because of that, we're better because you're a part of it. When you are maxed out on funding and you have a big enough staff and all that, that's awesome. Like, don't hear me saying, I don't want more money. Okay, everyone, I'll take your money. Yeah. But there is a tension in me sometimes, you know, this whole concept of like hoarding up in storehouses and all of this stuff. You know, there is a tension in me sometimes where, man, I want to make sure that we're leaving space for this community to continue to be woven into what we do. Yeah. And trying to hold that space and that tension and not just answering with, oh, well, we'll just buy it, or, oh, we'll just, no, like, someone has it because we know far too many people who are living in the top % of, you know, possessions in the world. Yeah. all of us here are, right? When you look at the world.
Natural gas is a real thing.
Yeah. But not even just those who are wealthy. Like, if you're in the middle class, when you look at a global scale, you're top percenter on what you have on possessions and
like a microwave and a TV and a roof over your head is like the top 1%.
Yeah, top one globally.
Yeah.
And so we all have in this community what our community needs. And so it's just a matter of asking.
Yes.
My husband always jokes with people, like, if we go to parties and stuff, don't tell her what you do for a living. Because I'm always like, hey, that's cool. Would you ever want to do that for free? You know what I mean? Like, if someone's like, oh, I cut hair. He's like, that's on you. You told her.
That's on you.
Yeah. But when you look at, like, just the brass tacks of our annual budget, for example, it's very low considerably, considering what we do. Well, the answer to that is because we get a lot of stuff for free because we ask. We don't pay for counseling for people in our programs. We don't pay for their medical appointments because doctors are doing that pro bono. I mean, so, and those doctors are now changed because, I mean, it's just this big, beautiful thing that has happened that, again, I had no idea was happening. I always joke, like, I didn't want to run a nonprofit, and most days I still don't. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still that person that's like, I just want to feed people out of my trunk, man. I don't want to be dealing with all this. But I'm just thankful. I'm so thankful that the hub is still here. This is our 18th year, going into our 18th year, that we're still here and thriving and, still showing up every day and essentially doing the same things that the origin story started with, just in scope different, right? But still being the guide in the community between the poor and the materially non-poor, being that guide still, advocating, still doing all the same things, just a little more formalized than it used to be.
Thankfully so. So you're legally protected.
Yes, legally protected, everyone. We're good.
Nice. And so what came off of the hub is the purchase ministry.
So the hub's actually an umbrella over three main things: the Lovewell, Purchased, and Rise Up and Roast. They're all under the Hub Urban Ministries. That's why it's called that. That's kind of an umbrella over. That's the name of our organization. We have multiple ministries, Purchased being one of them. That started in 2007. Nope. 2011. The hub started in 2007. 2011 is when Purchased sort of was the beginnings of it, started in our city. And then we have the Lovewell, which we had. The Lovewell was sort of born out of the work we were doing on the street, openly on the street. And then we did have a location called the Basement. It was in a basement of a building that we outgrew the day we opened. Like, it was just like massive. Yeah, it was fire codes being broken every day. Again, we're not there anymore, so we're past the legal. The city would love to listen to this podcast.
Right. No, don't sue me, bro.
Yeah, don't sue me. So the Lovewell was born sort of out of the work that story I just told. It was, that we moved into the basement, started learning how to do ministry inside of a facility for people, and then moved into the Lovewell Center and developed the earning and empowerment model that's there. Purchased was born organically out of, those relationships we were building with people who were unhoused. When we were encountering women, it was very consistently a part of their story that they had been exploited sexually. And so at the time, we're looking around going, okay, if this is the case, what do we do? And like, who in the community is already doing this? Because if someone's already doing it, then we just need to, connect with them or whatever. That's kind of typically our first stance is like, if someone's already doing it, let's just be the wind in their sails. Yeah. And nobody was. I mean, this was way back 2011.
I feel like you were definitely trailblazers here, because remember the first time I went to like a Purchased meeting, it was like people thought that it was like there maybe, and like maybe prostitution is just a thing.
It was
maybe
very trailblazing. Yes, Purchased was in every way. We were having to literally clear the path for this. I mean, there was no programming for it, but even in our community with law enforcement and everyone knew it was happening, and obviously everyone knows it's illegal. I mean, that was all Everyone knew that. But if I was a woman that was experiencing that, there was no clear path out.
No.
And so,
I feel like there was a stigma around it too. Like before, at least
time.
personally, like before I heard the stories of like the on ramp to that situation, it is not or before, I guess from a small minded person at that time, it was a thought of, that was a choice. Like they have chosen to do this, and they are either in prostitution because they want to make money that way, or they're a stripper because they want to make money that way, and that's their choice. They have made that decision, and now whatever comes out, the consequences of that are on them. But you brought to light that it is not always their choice. Very rarely their choice to be in that situation.
Yeah, and if they did technically make the choice, what choices were they choosing from?
Yes,
and what circumstances and vulnerabilities presented them with that choice. I mean, I think there are a lot of women who would say they are actively making that choice to do that, right? Like there are women who are making the choice, but when you look at their vulnerabilities, their circumstances, their deficits, the things that they are walking through, the trauma they've experienced, I mean, yes, they're making the choice, but not from having all the choices in the world.
Yes. They didn't choose between Harvard and prostitution.
No, they're not waking up just going, this is something I really want to do. Yeah. It's the choice that they have, right? Between, oftentimes, it may even be the best choice. And that's what people don't like to hear. Yeah. But like, for some of them, it is the choice to get them from A to B to C, you know what I mean? And so there was a lot, the early years of Purchase, and still to some degree, but the early years it was an uphill cultural change that had to happen. Yeah. It wasn't just building programming. We were having to really help people understand and bring, and here's what's funny is, I was having to bring people along to understand things that I was learning at the same exact time. Yeah. Does that make sense? Like, I also didn't know a lot of stuff. I also had a lot of misconceptions, and, because you don't know what you don't know, right? Like, I didn't know all of this before being face to face with them. And so having to learn it and teach it at the same time was very complicated. Yeah. Because I was also working through my own garbage when it came to what I thought, and sort of what I guess culture had informed me of. And so, that was in 2011. And again, because nothing existed, it exploded. I remember we started, actually, I'm giving all the shout outs. Andrew Crawford, who runs Rhino, and I have been friends for a really long time. And him and I were talking about Purchase. This was early on, and he's always been very passionate about anti-trafficking work. And he was like, "Hey, let me set you up a hotline on Google Voice, and we'll just see what happens." And it's the same hotline we still have, which is really cool. And so we literally set up this Google Voice number, put it on a card or whatever. And the first weekend that we went into one of the strip clubs, that was kind of the first thing we did. Besides working with the women we knew from the street, we went into the strip club, the Hustler Club, and the phone started ringing that night. Oh, wow. And it hasn't stopped. Goodness. So,
Were you ever scared? Because, there's an association with, those places and, crime activity. And that's the first thing I always think of. If I were to go into that situation, there's an understanding that there's almost a criminal enterprise attached to it. And so were you ever, nervous about your own or your family's personal safety?
I probably should have been. I would say, if I can think about the first time we were walking into a strip club, I did have a sense of nerves, but not for safety. I think my nerves were just what is this about to be? What are we walking into? What are we about to be exposed to, visually? That kind of stuff. Yeah. I have a really messed up gauge of safety. So But, in truth, I have always had a sense, and this is something my husband has always said, that the safe, and this sounds so cheesy. This is like something you'd put on a, tote, but the safest place I will ever be is in the center of God's will. And I do truly believe that. Yeah. Like I truly, that is a very deep down belief that I hold. And I think that is why I haven't felt a ton of fear. I have a healthy sense of risk.
Yeah.
I'm not, and my husband, consistently when I leave for work, when I leave for something, he's always like, don't be scared, but don't be stupid. That's a phrase he has said. Yeah. Our whole history of the hub, he's always said, hey, don't be scared, but please don't be stupid. Because he knows I'm not scared, but it's the stupid part that he's got to keep an eye on. But we are very wise in how we do what we do. We are not flippant. We are not knee-jerk responsive, meaning, oh my gosh, I got to get in my car and go do this without telling anyone where I am, or without, when a victim calls, we always have a mail with us. We're very wise. We use wisdom, but we're not fearful. And so I wouldn't say that I ever felt fear. No.
Yeah.
I felt discomfort because, when you're walking into a strip club, there is just a level of discomfort that it brings. No matter what. I think anyone who's ever been into a strip club would say that. It's not an environment that's just oh, this is chill. It's very different. So I would say discomfort, yes, but what I've learned is that discomfort doesn't mean unsafe. And sort of learning how to be okay with being uncomfortable, because I think sometimes people think, for example, if someone comes into a church lobby, an unhoused friend comes into a church lobby and is talking to themselves, right? And working it out with themselves. That's what I tell my kids. When my kids are like, what? I'm like, he's just working it out. Just give him a minute. There is typically a response is that others in the lobby feel unsafe. But the truth is that in this situation, let's say he's just talking to himself and grabbing a donut because you have it, right? Yeah. The truth is that what they really feel is uncomfortable, right?
Yes.
It's not that they're unsafe. It's discomfort. Discomfort because we live such comfortable lives. Discomfort makes us feel unsafe. And so I think learning the difference, right, between am I just uncomfortable right now or is this unsafe, has been a really valuable tool for us as a team, because there are times that we are actually unsafe and we have to respond accordingly, whether that's leave. We're not just who cares if you're scared? Do it anyway. We have a lot of things in place to be wise. Yeah. But most of the time, it's just uncomfortable, right? Yes. And discomfort, we don't like it. Nobody likes to feel uncomfortable. And so it flags as unsafe. And so I have lived most of the last 18 years uncomfortable, right? I'm not saying that I'm some hardened, I don't feel it or I don't, courage is that you're scared and you do it, right? I think people are I don't know how you do it and you're not scared. I'm like, well, you have the wrong impression of me because I don't do it without knowledge of what I'm feeling, or people will say, I don't know how you sleep at night, how you don't get upset about what you do. And I'm like, I do get upset about what I do. I think there's this perception that it doesn't bother me. I'm like, no, it bothers me to a great degree, and hopefully always will, because that would be really, that would be a red flag if I could enter into what we do on a daily basis and not be, shook from time to time, regularly about what I hear and see and experience. And so, yes, there is a level of risk. And another thing that people often ask is how is this, can you guarantee safety if we come and do this? I'm like, no, but I can't guarantee your safety if you go to Target.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there is no guarantee of safety anywhere. I think what happens is people perceive where we are and what we do as more unsafe, which for good reason. I mean, I'm being honest with you. Like, it's not like there's no reason to think that. We are working with individuals who have criminal records, and we're in, so I'm not discounting that.
Yeah.
But when someone says, if we bring a group to serve with you, is it going to be safe? I'm not going to, like, I can't guarantee that for you.
Yeah.
There is a level of risk that you're assuming doing the work that we do. Now, I think what the hub hasn't been known for historically is that because the culture we've created among those that we're serving is so strong, right, and so relational, that culture has changed. And the temperature is lower, and the aggression is lower, and there is a sense of difference, when people are in our buildings.
Yeah.
And also, we are wise, and we don't just throw volunteers to the wolves. You know what I'm saying? So it's just that balance of, one of our when you go through our training, one of the things we tell our volunteers, like, this is the volunteer sort of expectation. There's a thing we talk about. You can expect to be uncomfortable and expect that we are okay with you being, like, we're okay with that. So if you come to us and you're like, I'm uncomfortable, we're not going to fix it. We're just going to say, okay, well, let's talk about that. Let's figure out how to, give you some tools to navigate this, but we're not going to remove that discomfort because we can't. We can't. And so it's like I always use this phrase. I don't even know where I heard it. Someone else said it, but there's things in life that are problems to fix, and then there's tensions to manage. The risk in working with high vulnerability populations is a tension to manage. It's not a problem to fix. Like, it just is. It is.
Yeah.
And so you have to manage it. You have to learn how to manage it, be wise, build, rhythms and systems that protect but don't isolate and sort of insulate you from that risk. Yeah. Because if I was trying to live a risk-free life, I wouldn't be doing this.
No.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, that
you'd have to stay in your house every day.
Yeah, and even that. I mean, you've seen the stats of, like, falling down your stairs.
Very true. Yeah.
Like, if you get in the weeds of it, like, if we're seeking
hurricane season happens,
certainty, we're chasing something we will never have. And so, I just would much rather be doing what God is asking me to do, because I'm not going to find certainty anywhere.
Yeah, no.
Except for in Him. So just understanding that, like, staying in the center of His will is where true safety is. And then people are like, well, what if you die? I'm like, well, right, stuff happens. But, like, if you're in the center of God's will, then, do you see what I'm saying? Like, you can't live life in a way that is like, well, if I do this, then this, because that's not faith.
No.
So being wise, but also having faith that, if you're being responsive to what God's asking you to do, that He will protect you and guide you, and that what He wants for your life is what's best, even if that means suffering.
Yeah.
I mean, sucks to say. People are turning the podcast off.
Definitely
They're like,
true.
This is terrible. But it's just the case. Like, following God sometimes means you suffer.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, but even in that, you're the safest you would be anywhere else. So
I love that. I don't know if there's a verse or what it is, but I feel like a quote I always hear in those situations is, He didn't promise to keep you safe, but He promised to be with you. And so, like, that's always the comfort for me is, if you're in a hard situation or what you feel like is uncomfortable or unsafe, like, He isn't going to keep you from it, but He's going to go with you through it.
Yeah, that's right. Never leaves you. Yeah.
And so one of the recent things I've been introduced with the Hub Ministry is Rise Up and Roast.
Yes.
I love that coffee.
Oh, thank you.
The milk and honey blend is on point.
Yes.
If anybody wants good coffee from Shreveport that has a great mission, Milk and Honey, Rise Up and Roast.
Yes. So Rise Up and Roast is our newest initiative that we launched. This is our third year. It was in response to sort of paying attention to those in our recovery programs at the Hub, whether that's through the Love Well or Purchase.
Yeah.
That at the end of recovery, there was this really sharp drop off between, recovery life and real life, and finding employment and finding self-sufficiency and all of those things.
Yeah.
There was this, like, it was just a crash and burn at first. And so we started having conversations around how do we build a better on-ramp into self-sufficiency. And so we developed with Rhino Coffee, Rise Up and Roast, as a way to employ individuals in our programs while they're in them. So not after they graduate, but while they're in recovery or while they're in the program at the Lovewell, so that they can learn how to work in the safety of that recovery environment. And so basically how our company works is Rhino roast all of our coffee, and then we package it, ship it out, weigh it, grind it, all of that. And then we do pop-ups in the community, and our employees get the opportunity to do that. And while they're working for us, they're still in their programs, at the Lovewell or with Purchased. And so they're still going to classes and still going to counseling. But while they work with us, they also are working with a job coach that is working with them on a weekly basis to get ready for what's next. So helping them build a resume, looking for, what fits them, what fits their limitations, maybe what fits their criminal history, that kind of stuff. Getting a list of, hey, these are some really good opportunities in the community that are in a pay range that is, sustainable. We vet a lot of the places that we're sending them to, in the sense of we want to make sure that if they're going to go work somewhere, it is a place they can stay and it's not, a terrible environment.
Yes.
So they work with a job coach, and then they go on job interviews. And so while they're working for us, they're also able to try to find, their next place of employment for after they graduate. And then once they get employed, we just sort of ease them out into the world to work. And then in the Purchase program in particular, they can stay in our residential home for 3-ish months after they start working, so that they can just save and save and save and save. So trying to set them up for as much success as we can in that transition, because it is a massive transition for most individuals that we're serving. And so right now we have 4 employees from both programs, and they work 2 days a week. They come in, they get all the orders printed out, kind of divide it out. They grind it out, weigh it, grind it, package it, seal it, ship it out, deliver. They do everything.
Really? So they deliver in Shreveport?
Yes. So we have a wholesale program for churches, businesses, people who buy in bulk. They can become a wholesale partner and they get the coffee at wholesale price. And then we deliver to all of our wholesale accounts.
Wow.
And then for non-wholesale, so if you just go on the website and buy, we do have 2 free pickup locations. So they're delivering those as well. And then they go to the post office and they learn all the things. They learn shipping and logistics and inventory and customer service. And, we sit down and, because people be crazy sometimes when they email you. And we sit down and we, talk about, we laugh first, and then we talk about how can we answer this email and what can we do to be a better company for this person if we mess up someone's order. It's just really valuable skills to learn. And they're learning them in a place that they feel really safe. There's low risk involved, because they can make the mistakes. They can be late for work. They can snap, run their mouth or whatever, have a bad attitude. And the risk is a little lower because they're not out on their own and losing their job because they didn't have the tools to handle this moment. So we stop and we pause and then we address it and we say, what skills didn't you have in that moment? And let's work on, how we can do that better next time. And so we do all kinds of trainings. Like yesterday we did a communication training, like how to give an elevator pitch about Rise Up and Roast, but about anything. Teaching them how to say what you need to say, how to say what we do, how to put word, because those are skills that a lot of people don't have, and so we try to give them weekly sort of some kind of skill that we are teaching them. So this week we taught them that, and then Saturday we'll be at the farmer's market, and we try to teach them something and then give them a direct application. Okay, so we just learned these things. We're going to give elevator pitches Saturday, and I'm going to listen to them. So when people walk up essentially, if you think about it, when a customer walks up at a farmer's market, it's like the length of time you have is like when you ride an elevator, right? The doors close, you have 45 seconds to say something.
Yeah.
And so what they know this weekend is that I'm going to listen, and then we're going to circle up and we're going to give feedback. We're going to correct things. You know, it's a very like high learning environment.
Yeah.
And so this is our third year, and our first year, our goal was to break even, you know, and we did. And then last year, our goal was to make money, and we did. It was very little, but I didn't put a number on it. I was just like, we just want to make money.
Yeah.
And so it has been incredibly successful so far. So it has been a lot of fun. It's my favorite thing. So it is something. So I run the hub, but ministry wise, I'm in charge of Rise Up and Roast, and it is something that I choose to give a lot of my time to oversee it. Just because I love it so much. Like it's this like greenhouse of change and growth. And it is great coffee as well.
It is. And it's so important because like that is a skill that if you're in that unhoused situation for so long, you don't know what work is. Like we're all in this life right now, and we're all not in an unhoused situation. We have a 9 to 5 or are doing work. We know what's expected of us. But if you're in that unhoused situation and you don't know like work etiquette, you don't know like how to do things, and then you're just maybe you go through recovery and like now you're quote unquote like ready, or like someone who would be employable, you still have like no concept of like what this work life is.
And you know, a lot of times people think with job readiness like, okay, we need to do interview training, job etiquette, and that's important. But what often people don't understand is that most people who are coming out of being unhoused or, you know, exploitive things, they don't understand their own value and dignity to work, right? So, like, there's so much of why we get up and work that has nothing to do with the job.
Yeah.
It's because we know who we are. We know we add value somewhere. We know we have skills. We know if we, you know, all these things. And you're starting with none of those things with a lot of the individuals that we work. And on top of that, the women that we're serving out of Purchase have a very warped view of work. They've worked, right?
Yeah.
So we've got to undo a lot of broken ideas of work and hustle mentality and fast money mentality. I mean, there's so much. And for them, work was mostly attached to their body. So doing the untying of like, no, you are valuable because you have a mind and because you know, you can learn and you can do these skills and you're gifted at other things versus you just have a body and that's how you work. So it's a little more complicated than just like, here's an interview training and good luck. I mean, it's... you know, because you run the risk of people going into employment completely not ready.
Yes.
And so, you know, we focus on not just how do we make sure they get the job. That's actually not one of our priorities. They'll get the job. Because here's the thing. By the time they're in Rise Up and Roast, they've done the most work on their life than most of us do. Like they've been through a year of recovery plus they've learned things that most of us don't know. They've sat through trauma recovery. I mean, they are new people.
Yeah.
They've put in the work. By the time they get to us, they're going to be good employees. If we can give them the environment, we don't have to get them ready to get a job. That'll happen. Our focus is how do we rework some of these ideas that they have around work, around their value, their dignity, skill sets, things like that. Because if they can grow in those ways, when it comes to sitting in front of someone and getting a job, they can do it.
Yeah.
We want to focus on longevity and self-sufficiency. Like, how do we make sure you can sustain recovery and employment forever, right? Like, that's our goal is we want you to launch out of this place and not need this place. Like, and that's a different approach to job readiness than just like, here's an interview training, here's what to wear, you know. It's so much deeper than that. how we keep our jobs. We take for granted that we just know how to do that. You know, like how to handle conflict in the workplace, how to handle stress, how to handle anger.
Yeah.
Those are all things that we're focusing on so that when they do get a job, they're ready for what it takes to keep the job. And so it's a lot of fun. Yeah. It's really fun. And they're incredible. I mean, the 4 employees we have right now they're just incredible. They're just highly skilled. And one thing that I think they have taught me is they are absolutely pumped to be at work.
That's awesome.
I mean, it is just, there's a sense of, and that has challenged me consistently, you know, that like, man, to them, it's a privilege to put their hands to something and to get a paycheck and all of those things. And it's a really special thing to be a part of because every employee we've ever had over the years has been incredibly invested in the work we're doing, and they take it very seriously, too seriously sometimes. But and it's just really, it's an honor to be around them and to work with them. So, and it is also good coffee. So if you are a coffee drinker, if you're shameless plug, but riseupandroast.com, you can order it. We ship and free local pickup, and it's 100% model, so all the money spent on coffee goes directly to them and to the program they're in, so which is really cool.
It is. Well, Cassie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. This was fun. It's a really interesting conversation.
Good. Hopefully you enjoyed it.
No, I did. Thank you.
All right, well, guys, we will see y'all next time.